While the world rushes to develop critical minerals, Canada would do well to treat access to the supply of key minerals as the national security issue that it is. Heather Exner-Pirot is Director of Natural Resources, Energy and Environment at the Macdonald-Laurier Institute. Thanks for being with us.
Thanks for having me.
So just explain how critical minerals become a national security issue. Why do we need to think about them as a strategic resource?
Well, we have thought of them as a strategic resource for decades. But what happened is, we had a really big commodity cycle that peaked in 2013. And so it really seemed like we have had enough commodities and they've been quite cheap for a while. Now, as we look at the challenges of the energy transition, which really is moving from a fossil fuel-based to a mineral-based system, as we look at Chinese dominance of the critical minerals supply chain, of the renewable supply chain, and we look at the lessons that Russia provided us in terms of cutting off natural gas to Europe and the invasion of Ukraine. Now we are starting to say, you know what, we really need to start treating this as a national security issue.
And so what would that look like? If we agree that that's what it is, how do we secure our supply?
Well, there are many challenges. The thing about critical minerals, to say something is a critical mineral is a political designation. Mm-hmm. So every country will have a different list. Canada has this list. We have most of our critical minerals, but they tend to be very geographically concentrated. And so normally only 2 or 3 countries will provide a majority of supply of something like nickel or manganese or rare earths. And so that makes it, makes the supply chain quite fraught. And so we want to obviously increase production in large Western countries like Australia, Canada, the United States, in some friendlier countries in Latin America. But it'll be impossible for any one country to be energy independent on a system that depends on critical minerals.
Of course, we are thinking about all kinds of new technologies in the green transition space that will rely on some different forms of this resource in their different variations. Should we be thinking, if we're Canadian, of only developing the ones that we know we have access to? Or is that not the world we inhabit? We should assume that they will all be produced and go with whatever the technology we think is right.
No, we should start thinking of this strategically in a big way. And so you will always need a variety of critical minerals, and they'll always come from a variety of countries. And obviously China is dominant also in the processing, not just the mining of these. But we should start to look at our energy system from a perspective of what could we be more independent in? What do we have more of ourselves? Obviously, we're energy independent in fossil fuels, but nuclear is the other one where basically we have all the uranium and our nuclear supply chain is quite independent also. So from my perspective, if energy security is part of your equation, you're starting to look at what do we have better control of the supply in an energy system.
So we've been hearing a lot about the fact that Canada's kind of behind the 8 ball on developing our own resources. Do we have the sense of urgency, in your view, that we should be bringing to this subject?
I think rhetorically we are starting to see it. The public is starting to be aware of it. But I can promise you, when you look at actual capital expenditures, actual new mine development, it is not happening. We actually produced less critical minerals last year than we did in 2019. We're producing less copper, less nickel, less platinum group metals, less cobalt, all of these things. And the investment is not picked up. It's still quite a far ways, in real dollars, almost half of what it was in 2013. And so while we are starting to say the right things, the capital expenditures is not coming, and the regulatory system is still a huge barrier to that development.
Any thoughts about what might change that?
Crisis. It seems that we're so energy secure that we become so complacent. And so really you need to get higher commodity prices, and people need to feel that pain in their wallet, I think, to be able to ramp up production. But we know it takes, in Canada, it's 17 years on average to ramp up a new mine from exploration to production. So I do fear, in some ways it will be too late, or we will have those price spikes, those supply shocks for a few years before the market can readjust.
Heather, so good to have you for this. Appreciate your time.
Thanks for having me.
Heather Exner-Pirot is Director of Natural Resources, Energy and Environment at the Macdonald-Laurier Institute. And that's Taking Stock for this week. I'm Amanda Lang. Thanks for being with us.